So guys, this is Joel Baker. He's a really nice kid, right, Joel?
Yeah.
Anyway.
Can you show me a secret spot?
Joel, why are you doing this on a Hardy Boy story?
This is a Hardy Boys.
Yes, it's gonna go before we play our Hardy Boy story. Anyway, guys, before we play our Hardy Boy story, we're just gonna give a little interview with Joel Baker. Joel, what do you want to say?
I want to say that if you can tell me where the secret spot is now.
No, I can't show you that.
Okay,
Well,
done.
Chapter 4, The Jigsaw Face. The force of the blast jerked the bow of the sleuth out of the water. Both its occupants were hurled overboard and the boat itself overturned. Smoke billowed from the sents. "Come on," Tony cried to Chet. We must get out there and pick them up." "Where's the Napoli?" Chet puffed as they ran along the quay. I left it up at the north dock." People were already gathering excitedly along the waterfront. The two boys reached the north dock and leaped into the motorboat. Chet cast off and Tony gunned the boat outboard into life. In a moment they were speeding out on the bay. Chet, who was seated in the bow, was shouting in relief. "It looks like Frank and Joe are okay." The Hardys had been struggling in the water, but they now could be seen clinging to their overturned craft. The Napoli came alongside. "Boy, this is what I call service," Joe said as he and Frank were hauled aboard. Tony explained, "We came to give you a warning." "Tony, we came out here for you," Joe replied. "Your boat wasn't in the basin." No, I took it out this morning and tied it up at the north dock when I came back." "What do you mean about this warning us?" Frank put in. Tony hastily told about seeing the two men sneak out of the boathouse. Just as he finished, a Coast Guard rescue launch was reached the scents. Other boats were approaching also. "Everybody okay?" the chief petty officer called out from the Coast Guard launch. "We're okay, but plenty wet," Chet replied. "What happened?" the officer asked. "Some kind of explosion in the forward compartment," Frank told him. "We suspect sabotage." The chief ordered his coxswains to maneuver the launch close to the overturned craft. A hole had been blown in the hull near the bow, but the boat's special flotation appurtenance in the forward space had kept them from sinking. "Can you boat friends now tow the boat to a repair dock, all right?" the chief asked the Hardys. "We can manage it if somebody will give us a hand," Tony spoke up. "I'll help you lads," called a man from a nearby motor cruiser. "In that case, I'd like you fellows to come back to the Coast Guard station with me and make a report," the officer told Frank and Joe. The Hardys transferred to the Coast Guard launch, which immediately sped off to its base. Meanwhile, Tony and Chet tackled the job of putting a tow line onto the sleuth with the help of a man in the motor cruiser. "You're a friend of Hardy's, aren't you?" Yes. Yes, sir," Joe answered. "Is this sabotage connected to one of his cases?" Frank hesitated. We think so, sir, but we don't know yet." Lieutenant Asen asked. "Any theories?" "Someone was trying to kill us, or at least scare us off of our investigation," Frank said. "My guess is that the bomb was detonated chemically in some way by the salt water, but I have a hunch it went off too soon. The sabotage has hoped we'd be farther out in the bay." "Right," Joe agreed. "I'll bet the blast was supposed to swamp the boat fast, drown us, and send all our evidence against them to the bottom. But thankfully for us, the boat overturned and stayed afloat, giving us something to cling to." Lieutenant Asen took down their statements, then said, "For the record, I'll see you're carrying out your own investigation, but please keep us informed." He had an enlisted man drive the boys back to their car. Frank and Joe went home, where Aunt Gertrude greeted them with clucks of disapproval.
Well, I never. It's a good thing your mother has gone to the library board this morning.
Miss Hardy ordered the boys to take off their soaked shoes and to avoid tracking up the carpet, then went up anxiously.
What happened? Did that crook you were after make you walk the plank?
Frank chuckled and gave her a dumb hug, which Miss Hardy tried to fend off. Slight accident, Auntie. A dunking we didn't expect. The boys then changed into dry clothes when their telephone rang. Joe answered. The caller was Chief Collins. Got a report from Motor Vehicle Bureau on that sports license number. It's registered in the name of Adam Darrow. Never heard of him, Joe replied. Nothing on him in our files either. What about the address? Street number in Eastern City, Collins said. I checked at the police but they couldn't help. The old street's been demolished for expressway. Dead end clue. Well, thanks a lot, Chief. A short time later, Tony, Preto, and Chet arrived. They reported that the sleuth had been safely towed to the repair dock. Frank telephoned to determine the cost of repairing the boat. Then the boys gathered to discuss the day's events. Frank and Joe quickly told Tony about the case. You figure the man who planted the bomb was working for Strang? Tony asked. Could be, Frank said, especially if he found my knife and learned our name. I bet he recognized us all right, Joe put in. Who took Isla and Callie's amethyst? Tony asked. Maybe Strang did that too. You said he was a jewel thief. Frank found. That's true, but it's a big-time operator. I doubt if the amethyst is worth enough to tempt him. Anyhow, Strang's definitely got business in this area, Joe said. Do you think he could be hiding out in that old house, the one we saw near this morning? Could be, Frank said. Tony asked where the place is located. When Joe told him, Miss Hardy exclaimed, Why, that's the old Perth Mountain. Do you know who lives there? Frank asked. No one far as I've heard, she replied. It hasn't been occupied for years. The place had what you might call a sinister reputation. How come? Joe inquired. Seems someone died there under mysterious circumstances. Don't recollect just who, but there was talk about the place being haunted. Haunted? Chet swallowed and turned pale. Miss Hardy sniffed. All stuff and nonsense. Some folks will believe anything. That was years ago, even before you boys were born. Tell us more, Auntie, Frank urged. Gertrude Hardy settled in her favorite chair. Well, the house originally belonged to a man named Jerome Perth. Not a nice person at all, from what the folks used to say. Who was he? Frank asked. Some sort of big business tycoon, but a shady operator. People accused him of all sorts of things. Stock swindles, patent info agreements, I don't know what all, but I guess no one's ever really pinned anything on him. Must have been pretty slick, Tony remarks. Oh, he was, Miss Hardy agreed. And he made a lot of enemies. In fact, some of the people who had cheated even tried to kill him. Finally, he retired to that mansion he built and lived there the rest of his life. So his swindles didn't bring him any happiness, huh? Joe remarked. No, indeed. I recall hearing he had his study on the ground floor fitted up with a bed and hardly ever stirred or gotten out of that room. But you still don't remember who died there under mysterious circumstances? Joe said. Gertrude Hardy shook her head. Oh, no. Some relative, I think, but I don't recall the details. Frank, meanwhile, had a sudden hunch. He telephoned Isla Morton to ask if anybody else had been in the gemstone shop when the girls showed the puppeteer to the amethyst. Yes, there was, I replied. Yes. Another customer came in right after we did. I remember he asked us where he'd found our stone. Suddenly Isla gasped. Oh, you mean maybe he was the one who stole our amethyst? Could be, Frank said. He may have shouted you on the way back to your house. Is Callie still with you?
Sure, want to talk to her?
We'll come out. 5 minutes later, Frank and Joe and Chet were on their way to the farm in the Hardy's convertible. Tony had got to go back to his work at his father's construction company. When the boys arrived at the Morton's house, Frank carried in his father's facial identification kit. Besides an illuminated viewing screen, the kit contained strips of film showing hundreds of different hairlines, ears, eyes, noses, chins, and eyeglasses and hats. Isla and Callie were fascinated as the Hardys began asking them to describe and identify the features of the stranger at the gem shop. "It's like putting together a jigsaw puzzle," Callie exclaimed. Bit by bit, the film strips showing the man's feature were laid together over the viewing screen until a whole face had been assembled. "For Pete's sake!" Joe exclaimed. He and Frank had stared at each other. "That's the guy we picked up unconscious last night!" Chet peered over the shadows, open-mouthed in surprise. "It is for a fact." Joe, Frank said, "suppose you take that face to the gem shop and ask Mr. Filmer if he knows the man." "Okay. How about you? I want to go to the Bakeport Times office and see if I can dig up any stories in the Perth mansion back from the Brack files." Joe dropped his brother off at the newspaper office and a few minutes later pulled up to the front of Gilmer's gem shop. He carried the kit inside and spoke to the proprietor. Mr. Filmer, a skinny man with thick bifocal glasses, seemed oddly nervous. I don't really recall anyone else being in the shop when Niall and Callie were here," he stammered. "Please try to remember," Joe begged. I'm afraid I can't." "All right, at least let me show you the picture of the man's face and see if you..." Suddenly, Joe broke off. The door to the back room was ajar. He had just seen it move quietly. Someone was eavesdropping behind the door. "So that's why Filmer won't have me," Joe thought. "I'll bet he's afraid of the person hiding back there." The young detective wondered what to do. If he asked Mr. Filmer's permission to look into the back room, it would forewarn the eavesdropper. But if he acted in an impulse... Joe darted behind the counter and yanked open the door. A tall, sandy-haired man who had looked like one in the picture streaked across the back room toward the window. Joe rushed forward and lunged at him. The stranger grabbed his stole and hurled it at Joe. The stole struck Joe in his temple and he sank to the floor unconscious. You know the drill. If you want to find out what happens to Joe, just keep on listening for Chapter 5. See you until then.